he cannot make those observations that he's made about an official without being accountable for them. He's effectively questioning the integrity of an official. This is One-to-One with Simon Jordan. Don't forget, as always, to keep liking and subscribing, and of course, leaving the questions in the comment section below. But let's get on with this week's show. Well, Joe Lewis and Daniel Levy travel in tandem. So if you take one out, you take the other out, because Daniel's a significant shareholder in Tottenham, and obviously Joe Lewis is the more significant one. Everyone understands whose money is behind Tottenham. It's Joe Lewis's money. So if there was more fluidity to the money, then you might have an argument to suggest that Daniel isn't deploying it well. I think there's an element of Daniel and Joe are cut from the same cloth. If you're Joe Lewis and Daniel Levy is producing a business that's competitive, cost effective, and punching at times above its weight, when you've got a team that's got the 5th or 6th highest wage bill, the 5th or 6th biggest income in the league, and the 5th or 6th most expensively assembled squad, then you expect them to finish 5th or 6th, wouldn't you? As a matter of course, with the exception of Chelsea and a few other people currently that don't follow that that blueprint of the sort of Moneyball mentality. So some would argue that Tottenham are punching above their weight. Of course, Daniel is culpable for certain things, but at this moment in time, the predominant culprits are managers and players. You know, quarterfinals of FA Cups against Sheffield United are nothing to do with Joe Lewis and Daniel Levy. Opportunities that have not been taken in the past in individual games and tournaments are nothing to do with Joe Lewis and Daniel Levy. Missed opportunities possibly when Spurs could kick on at times will be the arguments. The same person that is being vilified for all the travails of Tottenham wasn't being praised as much when they were being successful. The same person that employed Pochettino. Now, of course, for the binary world of football fans, if I say anything that's not critical for those that have one view, which is Daniel Levy is the devil incarnate and needs to be removed, then I'm a Levy apologist or a Levy supporter. I'm neither. I'm just a balanced individual that does not think it's all one person's fault and doesn't think it's all one person's solution in terms of when they're successful or doing well, it's all down to one person, and when they're doing badly, it's all down to one person. Look, Daniel's got to manage the media better and perhaps manage his communication with the fans better. And perhaps right now, neither would make any difference. But to answer your question, if I'm Joe Lewis, I would find it difficult to square a circle for a bunch of hostile, aggressive, rabid, disappointed fans that think Daniel Levy is the predominant reason. Daniel Levy was the one that got Mourinho, the one that got Conte. You might want to look at those two guys and see how much value they added at times. And of course, there'll be controversies about when Mourinho was taken out. They might want to work out what that group of players felt about Mourinho and why that decision might have been made. They might want to work out why these players are being accused of certain things by managers who have added no value themselves. One of the things that Conte was supposed to do is better players. Most coaches are the top end, better players, with the exception of Victor Moses, my former charge, Palace, when he was at Chelsea. I can't recall in recent times in English football how much Conte's improved players. But no, I'm not just going to go down the line of suggesting that because you think that Levy is the reasons why Tottenham are the only reasons why Tottenham aren't achieving and what Tottenham should and shouldn't achieve by your standards or your views. I'm not going to say Levy out because it makes me play to the gallery. I'm also not going to sit here and say everything Daniel does is right because I don't think it is. So no, if I'm Joe Lewis, I wouldn't be bowing to the mob. And I would not be necessarily taking Levy out. If I wanted to facilitate a better solution, I might be giving Daniel a bit more money to work with. Jurgen Klopp, to me, is one of the best managers the Premier League has produced for some time. They were not in a great moment, Liverpool, and there's often this case that when Liverpool come back off a remarkable season, they come back to a very difficult one. When they defended their Premier League, they were poor, and we were told it's because of the lack of attendances at Anfield and the loss of central defenders. And this season, after the back of a potential quadruple last year, and missing out on the Premier League and Champions League by margins to complete that remarkable quadruple, and the side was phenomenal, we're told that it's because the midfield has lost its legs. In the centre of that has to be Klopp. But don't get me wrong, I think Klopp is one of the finest managers, as I've said already, that the Premier League's produced. I'd have been fascinated to see how he went up against Alex Ferguson if Alex Ferguson had been in his pomp. But he is a bully at times. And I think some of the best managers are bullies. And you would want your manager, if you was your manager for your team, to be a little bit of a person that was capable of carrying his weight and pushing himself around. It was unnecessary and unacceptable, his little antics running up to the fourth official. Ironically, Karma intervened and he pulls a hamstring or whatever he did. But what was more concerning is the allegations he made about the official. With all due respect to Klopp, and of course those that support Klopp will say anything that vaguely moves into the territory of criticism means that you're a Klopp hater. Certainly not. He cannot make those observations that he's made about an official without being accountable for them. He's effectively questioning the integrity of an official. He's effectively suggesting that there's bias and that the man isn't professional enough to referee Liverpool games. And if he's going to bring it up, he needs to go the whole hog and tell people what he said in terms of Tierney when he came over to him and booked him, or whatever he's alleging that whenever it was. And I thought the Sky interview did very well, because he didn't let Klopp get away with it, tried not to anyway, and Klopp tried to get away with it, realising probably in the moment perhaps he's gone a bit too far. We either accept and respect that officials make mistakes and expect them to have a degree of understanding about the mistakes they've made, but also respect the profession that they're in, or we don't. We're talking about Andy Robertson the other day getting involved with an official. The official copped it when it was really Andy Robertson that instigated it. We're talking about Klopp on a number of occasions challenging officials in a way that's not acceptable. He acknowledges it himself, but there has to be consequences for these managers, not just Klopp, but any of them that do it. And it doesn't mean just a one-game ban. It's not a ban, they're sitting up in the stadium. What a ban should mean, if a manager gets sent off, he should be either not able to come to training, and certainly not be in the stadium for match day, or at least the latter, which is not be in the stadium for match day. Because this kind of behaviour, it flows through the game, it drops into the grassroots, and people don't like that correlation. But I do think he's got to be charged for those comments. One thing, doing the 4-act play up and down the touchline, which by the way isn't acceptable, the fourth official was quite laughable really, because the fourth official is not involved in on-field decisions. The other thing, making the observations, that's where he's pushed the boundary. I don't think people should get hysterical about it, make it about Klopp, because a lot of them do it. And I wonder, when he talks about what the official says, I'd love to have the boot on the other foot, which is the officials telling us what these managers say. Because I've seen them and I've heard them in my time, and I've seen them and watched them on television, and some of the things that they seem to be saying to officials, they get away with blue murder. So they'll say it's not the official's job to affect the outcomes of games. Well, by the very nature of the beast, that's what they do. So I think that Klopp has something to answer. I don't think he's a disgrace, but I think it's fundamentally wrong, and it needs to be attended to, and he needs to be consequenced and put in his place. But on the final part of this, I also do believe that officials should now begin to speak out after games and talk about instances themselves, not do press conferences and take up inordinate amounts of time, but have a voice. And I think that Howard Webb will move to that at some point, because I think there's an element of this is a profession that needs to be valued and respected and made accountable, and people that make errors have consequences, but also they're voiceless. And these guys like Klopp and other managers are getting away with quite a lot these days. Look, there's a school of thought. I get that school of thought, which is they got in early, built up the base whilst there was still an element of fluidity around FFP governance, changing down to 90% of turnover when it comes to transfer depreciation and wages, and then in 2 years' time dropping down to 70%. I understand that could be part of their thinking. It's very risky to stockpile. I mean, Bowley has done everything against the orthodoxy, against the conventional thinking, from firing a manager that people would laud and applaud for his achievements, through to hiring Potter as a project that they didn't follow through on, through to spending £600 million, through to the way they put players on on contracts of 8 years. I mean, I don't like the rule change, because if you want to, the rules are that you can capitalise your players over whatever the contract length is. If you want to put them on an 8-year contract, that's what you should do. Of course you're doing it with financial fair play in mind. Who doesn't? All the income that you generate and the money that you spend, if you're not running your business properly in football, then you wouldn't be paying attention to the governance. That's not trying to get around it, it's just being mindful of it. Yes, there could be a school of thought, or it simply is they wanted to make a hell of a statement. They believed that there was a way of doing things. And what he'll do, Bowley, is he'll settle down now. He'll have had his moment, like we all do as new owners, of going in there and saying, I'm not going to play the game of the establishment, I'm going to do it the way I want to. And then you realise, inch by inch, yard by yard, you move the needle a little bit, you move the dial a little bit, but you end up back in conventional thinking. He should have brought a manager in after he fired Graham Potter and gone after who he wanted. And if it was Pochettino, nailed him down, got him going and finished the season on a high rather than the dreadful low that they're going through at this moment in time. But structuring your finances and realising the landscape you're working on isn't the same as trying to avoid financial fair play by getting sponsorship deals from businesses that you are in control of or own and inflating them, or misrepresenting figures to various authorities. That's deliberately a Machiavellian and abusive process. Adapting to the circumstances is not the same. But I think Chelsea will be fine. I think that I don't think they'll win much with Pochettino. I think he'll make them a great contender. But I don't go down the route that Bowleynomics, as I've called it, is designed simply to stockpile, to go round the mechanisms. But it might be. But so what? So what? I mean, 2003, 2004, Abramovich comes in and spends in money terms comparable amounts to what's being spent by Bowley now. Just inflation and the value of the marketplace looks the same. So I just think it's an American coming here, looking at the Premier League, thinking there's an opportunity to do things in a certain way, and he'll settle down and he'll do things in a slightly different way. But we'll see. If ex-pros want to get involved in doing other things rather than just criticising what referees do or don't do, I think that'd probably be a godsend. The more professional footballers that put their money where their mouths are and get involved with adding value and solutions rather than just pointing their finger at what's wrong and telling you who's to blame for it would be useful. People make errors. VAR is a human being looking at a digital screen. It's nothing more than that. And you will always see that people make errors. There's no, SLA, service level agreements like you have with your broadband, which says you're going to get 99.9% of it right. And when you have your broadband at home, you have a SLA which says you'll be up for 99% of the time, which means 1% of the time it's going to be down and you're not going to have broadband. Now, I know that's a bit of a departure from the question, but referees, whether it's in the Stockley Park, looking at VAR, or on the pitch in the moment, will make errors of judgment, like football managers do, like players do, like owners do. And the only person people don't have a voice are those. Now, the question is, should we get players in? Be delighted to have them in there. Be delighted for them to be able to give a proper expose as to what they're seeing, add value to it. I would suspect they've been involved in some of the processes. People like Martin Keown talk about wanting to be involved. Fantastic. I'm not sure how much insight you'll get from Martin at times, or how many things he'll get right. But I do think there's a space for it. I do think there's a place for it. And I do think that if they wanted to do it and they were able to do it, they should be able to do it. Then you get into the argument of who would do it and what would be the return for it. Because if you got started to get, because of the career path of lesser players playing in the lower leagues that haven't made the kind of monies that the Premier League players have made, you'd be putting League One, League Two players in it. Then the argument would rage that League One, League Two players weren't technically good enough to assess the vagaries of a particular circumstance because they hadn't played at that level. Whatever you do, in certain spaces where the background noise is we didn't want it in the first place, you'll always have people, the naysayers and the objectors, saying this isn't right, that isn't right. But I certainly think there would be an advantage in certain players being involved in it, also telling the world what it's like to be involved in it, and at the same time as perhaps adding some solutions to some of the problems that we see, which is VAR is not some standalone thing. It's a referee sitting in a truck looking at a digital outcome and trying to give a better outcome than the guy on the pitch that's seen it at 100 miles an hour. And I think more often than not, it gets it right. I still think that there will be an element of getting it wrong, and we want to try and find a way to minimise that and take away some of the objectivity. I'm not a VAR advocate. I believe that it was the right thing to do to improve the game and take away some of the mistakes that are made that justify or jeopardise people's outcomes. And I still think there's another evolution of it where it will get better and better. And I would like sections of the media to pack it in with their endless putting things and people on platforms and pedestals to judge them by standards that are unreasonable. But I also do understand that VAR has got to improve, has got to take away some of the arguments, do things better. So yes, the answer to this in a long-winded way, let's get some players involved and let's see what they have to say about themselves when they're sat there. And let's get some media communication going. And whether that's two-way transactions inside the stadium where people get to listen to what the referee's decision-making process is in conjunction with the Stockley Park guys, fine. But yeah, players involved. In this instance, I would let the lunatics into the asylum and maybe even run it. Right, that's your lot for this week's edition of One to One with Simon Jordan. Let me know your views on Joe Lewis and Daniel Levy and all the debacle that Spurs appears to be at this moment in time. Jurgen Klopp and his antics. And of course, ex-pros adding some value to the VAR debate. Keep leaving your questions in the comment section below. Keep liking and subscribing. And I'll see you next time.